Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking a look at a quite fantastic game by Stockfish against Eagle from the TCEC Season 25 Division P. I don't often use the word revolutionary when describing a plan found by engines. Not too often anyway. But this really struck me as that. I have the feeling somehow that imperceptibly, the engines have just made another step forward recently in terms of understanding these blocked King's Indian structures. And I looked through this game, analysed a lot, and also analysed a lot of related things, and felt I'd just learned a huge amount. Something that I would have just dismissed as totally ridiculous. Maybe a few months ago. Now suddenly, I've just got something new in my arsenal. So wanted to share that with you, and just show you just how good engines are nowadays. So let's have a look. What had Jeroen cooked up for us? It was a King's Indian, knight c3, bishop g7. And it's not a Mar del Plata this time, but it's a bishop e3 King's Indian, which is a variation that I used to play a lot when I was professional. So h6 played by black, which is a little bit of an odd move in a way, but the idea is really that black wants to play the move knight g4 to disrupt this white setup. But if you go knight g4 immediately, then there's bishop g5. This is well known main line, but black plays f6, and it's a little bit ugly for black because the bishop on g7 is blocked behind the pawn on f6. Obviously, later on, black will try and play f5, but if this knight gets chased away before then it has to go back to h6. The position gets it's very interesting, very unclear, not bad for black, but it's a lot of things change basically. So what you're aiming for with h6 is to go knight g4 without allowing bishop g5. Now the book line goes castles, and here black plays a very bad move, but that's all part of the book, just to give the engine something just a little bit worse. Black should just play knight g4, making use of the fact that he's gone h6. But black plays knight c6 in this position, and this is quite a big strategical mistake, because after d5, knight e7, white plays knight d2. What is so fantastic about knight d2? Well, the key point is that this bishop is very, very good for white. It's on the great square. It supports c4 to c5. It can also drop back at times to cover all sorts of dark squares on the king side. So it's very well placed. Secondly, this bishop, together with the queen, they do an excellent job here because they stop any black knight from coming into g4 or h5, and that's kind of would be the easiest way for black to get the counterplay going. Knight g4 attacking a bishop on e3, followed by f5, or knight h5 aiming for knight f4 and then f5. But having the bishop on the e2 and the queen on d1 like that, that's actually stopped. And then what you can do, it's very easy to get the bishops on e2 and e3. You can do that very, very early, and actually this is another system that I played very heavily when I was a young professional, which is to play bishop e3, and actually recently it's got incredibly popular. I should have kept on playing it really. E5 d5, you've got this set up with the bishop e2, bishop on e3, but your knight is still on g1, and getting this guy developed is a little bit tricky because as soon as you go knight f3, then knight g4 happens. Okay, you can play h3, but then you're wasting a tempo to get it. So actually what white gets with this poor move order, knight c6, white gets everything that white could desire. The bishop's in a perfect position, and the knight already developed, which then also gives white the opportunity to castle kingside as well. So I mean, it's not like it's a total disaster for black, but in terms of an anti-King's Indian setup, this is absolutely perfect for white. And of course, you know, the knight being on d2, when you go c5, the knight can come into c4 and join in very quickly on the attack on d6. And also the pawn on e4 is very nicely covered by both knights. So if a knight wants to move away to attack the queenside, start making inroads there, then it can do it as well. It's just that white's kind of got everything that he could possibly want. So I think that this was the last move of the book, c5, just blocking up the queenside, and it's always a double-edged move for black to block the queenside like that. You know, on the one hand, you're trying to prevent white from gaining space quickly with a move like c5. On the other hand, you know, this pawn on c5 is a target, and so you know it's closer to the white position, so it's easier to hit with b4. And indeed, you know, if you were to ask me what is white's plan in this position, I would say 100% b4. That's the move you've got to go for. So I'd say a3 followed by b4 is automatic, indeed, the only good plan in the position, more or less. I mean, that's exaggerating just a little bit. I mean, you could look to play a move like g4, for example, try and clamp down on the king side first before playing your queen side attack. But the only thing that you're going to be thinking about is to play a3 and b4, which is why I kind of fell off my chair, eyebrows raised far above my rather large forehead, jaw dropped, all of those things. Well, in Dutch, it's you'd say your trousers fell off. Yeah, just amazement, because Stockfish played the move a4. And this is a move that, you know, if a beginner said, okay, I play a4 in this position, I would say, no, what are you thinking about? Absolutely not. Terrible mistake. With only just a slight doubt in the back of my mind of, is it really as bad as all that? But the point about the move a4 is that black has the chance to play the move a5. And once the move a5 happens, essentially white is never going to get b4. Never ever going to get b4. So basically, with a4, white is giving black the chance to stop all his queenside counterplay dead forever. And in principle, you wouldn't think that would be a good thing for white, right? You think it's absolutely an absolute disaster. And, you know, I mean, watched TCC an awful lot, and I think, you know, every TCC chatter will agree that, you know, there are a lot of positions, or always have been in the past, where the engines have been quite poor in playing these structures, or taken strange decisions like blocking the structure on both sides and still claiming a +1 or +1.5 advantage. And well, you know, that's your initial reaction to say, well, you know, this is a similar sort of case in point. However, you look at what Stockfish did, and you sort of understand that this is not, you know, poor play or misevaluation. This is actually understanding the position really deeply, and it does fit in with one of my favourite themes. You know, something that I'm really looking a lot at with my engines at the moment, which is, you know, there's all these positions, for example, in the Rye Lopez, you know, where you can also choose to block the queen side and then make something happen on the king side. You know, how much space, how much play on both flanks do you really need in order to win a position like this? And well, I mean, analysing with the engines, looking at these Rye Lopez and King's Indians, a lot is changing in my head, I have to say. Just before going further on a4, a5, just one thing to point out is that this actually has a huge positional threat. Because if black doesn't do something, then white is going to play the move a4 to a5. And after a4 to a5, black is no longer able to stop b4 in any meaningful way. Because the white queen's coming to a4 and you're playing b4. You get hit by bishop on d7, for example, the queen goes back to a3 and you play b4. And what you've actually got, you know, if you get in b4 in that way, then it's an absolute dream. because you've got your pawn on a5 already, which makes it much harder for black to play b6. When you get b4 and white's already got pressure against the queen side. Normally, black plays b6 and then a5 when you try and get in b4. So, a5 is just an absolute huge threat. So black has to react with a5. And then the question is, when black plays a5, what is white getting for this? Well, actually, as Stockfish's next move points out, white is actually getting quite a bit for it. First of all, you get this square on b5 for the knight. Well, that's fine in itself. But of course, the key point is that you're attacking this this d6 square. And that actually makes it hard, slightly tricky for black to get the pieces organized. I mean, you can't play a move like bishop d7 because of knight takes d6. And the second thing that adds, that pressure on d6, it means that this possibility of f4 from white is much, much more dangerous than normally, because after ef4, bishop f4, normally you concentrate a little bit on the weak and dark squares around your e4, d5 squares. You say, oh, what if black was to get a knight on e5? But here, after f4, ef4, bishop f4, we're putting real pressure on d6. Very hard for black to get free. And the other thing that you're going to see that's also quite amazing is that the ability to swing your rook over on the third rank over to f3, to g3, potentially even to h3. That is a huge. That really increases your activity. And of course, in combination with f4, you can get doubled rooks in a very easy way. And again, this is a big theme that I'd highlighted in Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which, frankly, I feel as a book is becoming more and more clairvoyant and looking into the future. The more engine games I see like this, you just see all the themes that I picked out just being used more and more in engine games. So definitely would recommend looking at that one if you're keen on engine games and want to learn from them. But yeah, moving the rook across like that is really, really valuable. And of course, it's one of those relative things that black doesn't gain anything. I mean, you can put a rook on a6, but well, hey, there it is, completely out of play. Where the white rook, gains a lot of mobility. So actually, this move a4 allows a5, no counterplay with b4, but it really boosts white's kingside counterplay in three ways: the pressure against d6, f4, which then becomes more dangerous, and the ability to transfer a rook over to the third rank. And as we're going to see in this game, this is more than enough for Stockfish to get a serious advantage. Now, one thing that interested me in all this was, of course, we're doing this from a position of strength, you could say, because we're using Jeroen's book here, which is, unbalancing, of course. And you might point, to a few things that that black has done wrong in this position. Well, first of all, h6, always a slightly dubious move in these King's Indian positions, weakens the kingside light squares, gives a target for white for bishop h6, and of course allowed white this ideal setup, anti-King's Indian setup with bishop e3, bishop e2, and the g1 knight over on d2. So I sort of wondered, well, let's take a main line like the Mar del Plata, the proper Mar del Plata. So knight c6, d5, knight e7, and then play this move knight d2, which is one of the main lines, not the main line. You mostly see knight e1 at the TCEC, but knight d2 has been quite popular at times, and from time to time comes back in popularity. And now, not the very best move here for black, which is a5, but what if I was to play the move c5? I mean, after all, this is a much better version for black, right? You haven't played this move h6, and the bishop is still on c1. I mean, what would the engines do? Would the engines play a4 in this position? Or would they just say, nah, that's only good in unusual circumstances? Well, I mean, I again fell off my chair really, because a4 is what the engines want to do in this position. Leela wants to do this in this position. So, and again, very similar ideas. If black doesn't react, white's going to play the move a5 and then get in b4 afterwards. And if you play the move a5, then, for example, rook a3, knight e8, knight b5. This was the way that Leela was doing it. And, there was something which I do have to show you, which was simply, just falling off my chair. Well, Dragon was playing king h1, knight e8, g4. And this was not very good, really, because this really led to one of those positions where everything got completely blocked. And Dragon was still claiming an advantage, but well, any human player can tell you nothing's going to happen. You're never gonna make anything happen. For example, oops, knight f3, bishop c1 takes, g5, h5. There we are, and well, it's just a draw for 100 moves. So Dragon that's one of Dragon's weaknesses. It'd be interesting to see whether Torch has improved on that, but that's still one of Dragon's weaknesses. Not quite as good as Leela and Stockfish in these King's Indian positions. But what Stockfish did in this position was the move h4. Amazing, right? You know how chess strategy has changed. But a4 and h4, just with the idea of playing something like rook a3, knight e8, and then h5, and you know, the rook's capable of swinging over at some stage and assisting an attack on the h file. I mean, really quite amazing. Another move that they were playing was simply you know, g3 and then f4 in this way. I'm not quite sure why you need h4 in this position, but anyway, that's what they were doing. And then the rook's coming round to a3. You know, and well, look what happened. Knight g8, rook e1, e5. To be honest, this is incredible strategy. I think this game would be worth a look. But yeah, not taking back with the f pawn, but making sure that the knight's taking there, aiming for the c6 square. Obviously, we've got the b5 square as well. And if you just take a little look what happened, we won the exchange, and then we brought the rook over to h3, which is obviously, you know, covering some weak squares and also threatening some stuff and defending some stuff. And I quite like this one afterwards. He played b3 and bishop b2, just you know, just completely spreading all over the board. Who was that against? That was Stockfish against Dragon in one of my engine games. So I mean, that is, you know, even from you know, the a main line where black in actual fact is doing pretty well. c5, quite a common move, even if it's not the main one. And then once again, this idea of a4, not fearing the blocking of the queenside, just thinking that the presence of a knight on b5, attacking the weakened d6 square, the ability to play f4 with much more punch and power, and the ability to transfer a rook around to the third rank, over to the kingside. That's giving white a lot more power. And well, I mean, frankly, you know, to me that's total revolutionary. You know, I've never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like it in any books. And yeah, and I would have told you were a total idiot if you'd showed me this idea in a game. So yeah, I mean, really, you know, really, this is really, you know, another big example where engines are you know, really pushing what's possible on a chessboard. So after a5, back to the game, Stockfish-Igel, knight b5 and b6. Just shoring up the queenside. I wasn't quite sure really why it was 100% necessary straight away, but it will eventually be necessary. But king h1 was played by Stockfish in this position. f4 immediately is also possible. But Stockfish was sort of anticipating this move happening, knight h7, just preparing f5. I also looked at a few other moves. I looked at, well, you could go g5, for example, but then we'll just go g3 and then f4 and just break through all the same. So, yeah, Eagle played knight h7, which was also Dragon and Stockfish's main move, and now we got something really great. So f4 happening. Obviously, e takes f4, I go bishop f4, and d6 is lost in actual fact. f5 from Eagle, and now we get a Stockfish special here. Because Dragon was a little bit less oomphy about things. He was taking and going g3, which is quite decent, or playing queen c2. But Stockfish throws in incredible move, g4. In we go. And what's the idea of this? Well, I mean, actually, the idea of this is we're going to take and we're going to play the rook over to g1 and start attacking here. And well, you know, the rook is available to drop over here. I mean, really, you know, all of these, you know, these are quite kind of well-known things. Although I've never quite seen g4 in this exact position, I have to say. But these are quite well-known things. But the fact that you can bring a rook over to the along the third rank is just really increasing the power enormously. And well, if you go something like fe, I'll just go fe, and well, h6 is hanging whenever you take with the bishop, And the key point of having the pawn on g4 is that it stops any piece coming to f5. It's a well-known thing in the King's Indian. It's just that doing it whilst the central tension is still on the board is something quite amazing. I've never quite seen that before. Well, Eagle didn't take things lying down, because played a next move that made this incredibly picturesque. Played the move g5 here. Wow, look at that. And White has to decide exactly how you're going to alter this tension. And well, Stockfish went for something very, very interesting. Took on g5 here, and then f4 from Eagle. So Stockfish took on h6. Now bishop h6, I was wondering about this, whether you could sort of play like this and go for some sort of play on the king side, some sort of compensation. I don't know, knight g5, maybe get the rook over to h8, play on h4. But the engines again demonstrate the use of this rook along the third rank. This was Leela's idea: rook h3, king g7, rook g1, and rook h5. And well, this rook's doing a grand job, really. It's going to support h4 and stuff like that, and well, you just can't get rid of it, basically. I think even if you manage to get rid of it with a bishop, I'd just let you and then take and then have the open g file. So again, I mean, you're just noticing that in all these tactics, it's just already working. There's another, this is a game of dragons here, so bishop g5, again rook h3 and rook h5 here. Just yeah, I mean, actually also ready to play the rook to f5 here, just to completely block any black counterplay. So again, this move a4, just making so many things possible. I mean, Eagle went for something very interesting here. Went fe3, takes, and then rook f4. And really interesting, because after knight f3, knight g6, queen b3 from Stockfish. Yeah, Leela and Dragon were tending to go for rook a3 and rook takes e3. But actually, I mean, just from an intuitive point of view, I just don't like this at all. I think these rooks are bound to have more to do, fighting on the f-file or whatever, than just protecting an e-pawn somehow. It feels very clumsy to me. So yeah, queen b3 takes e3, really did seem like the main move. And this is a very interesting position here. Now, I'll just point out one tactic before talking about the position, that if you go bishop g4, then knight takes c5 is very strong, because after ef5 we go rook f4, and if you go ef4, then I've got queen c3 check, and then I'm going to pick up the bishop. So you can't get your pawns back. So actually you're going to be 2 pawns down. But I wasn't 100% sure about this position, because White's 2 pawns up, but Black's incredibly well entrenched on the kingside dark squares. The rook on here, the knight on here, the knight can come around here. Obviously, pawns on g4 and e4 under pressure. So, it didn't seem that easy for White to make progress. It's one of those positions where you could end up being 2 pawns up, but just not being able to break through. And, from that point of view, you'd say that is then the drawback of having fixed the queenside structure. If the pawns were on a2 and a7, you'd start with a3, b4, and you'd start distracting Black on the other side. Here it isn't really possible. And indeed, Stockfish as Black was drawing loads of games against Dragon and Leela, but on my hardware. But Stockfish as White was winning enormous amounts. I mean, really enormous amounts. So yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those positions where you have to say, yeah, well, you need Stockfish to do this. And what's the biggest idea that White's got? It's to try and actually bring this knight over to f5 somehow. If you could do that, then yeah, it's a total catastrophe for Black. And we're going to see how Stockfish does this. So bishop a6, and now this very unusual move, knight a3. Now, in my engine games, it must be said that knight c3 was at times chosen by Stockfish too. But knight a3 is a lot nicer, I think, because it's aiming to bring the knight round to f5 through c2, e3, f5, and that does feel like a much more elegant way of doing it than trying to do it through c3, d1, because c3, d1 you cut the coordination of the rooks, whereas knight c2 to e3 you don't. And well, that yeah, those sort of things, it always helps tactically. Of course, I'm being incredibly, general by saying this, and I'm sure that a lot of calculation lay at the basis of it. But, from a human intuitive point of view, that is the one that you choose first of all, if you spotted it there, because knight a3 is quite an unusual little move. So queen f6 played, rook g1, just protecting the pawn on g4. Knight g5 takes, and knight c2. And well, I think you can see why this is nicer somehow. If my knight was on d1, well, I'd be trying to work out straight away how to get my queen active before to activate the knight before I can get my rooks active. Here, I've got no problem at all. I can just bring this rook into play whenever I want to. Knight h4, and now there's many different ideas. Stockfish played queen d3 at the TCEC, queen g6. And then just king g1, and well, this is a very nice idea from Stockfish. The idea is, if you want to take my pawn, you take the pawn, but then we'll exchange off queens. Yeah, I mean, Igel did it. Queen takes e4. At some stage, you're going to have to do it because knight e3 to f5 is coming in here. So takes rook e3, rook f4, b3. Bishop c8, h3. And, well, I think that we can safely say in this position that white has definitely consolidated. All the pawns protected here nicely. Rook on e3, covering everything. Bishop on e2. It's not too dangerous if a rook comes into f2. And, yeah, going to be hard. Yeah, the black knight doesn't have any f5 into d4 attempt. It's just really everything's got to use the f4 square, which is just a little bit yeah, a little bit tricky. So yeah, the question is whether you can reel in the point. I mean, that is the question, and it's not immediately obvious because black's still very well entrenched on the dark squares. But the point is, of course, with the queens off, yeah, that's obviously going to be a lot easier. And well, Stockfish did it beautifully, of course. First move is knight e1, just cover the g2 square, just stop black from doing anything like this. That would also, knight e1 would also have been the reply to rook f2. King g5, king h2, and king g3. So very, very nice, just activating the king there. And we're also attacking the bishop on the knight on h4 there. So bishop f5 was played by Igel. Sweet little tactic, takes knight takes f5. But now knight f3 check happened, and after takes we go rook takes. That's very nice indeed, just going to swap off the rook. And of course we've also got the move h4 check now in to drive the king back. So yeah, it feels like it should have been a bit harder than this, to be honest. I mean, I do have to say, but like in 3 or 4 moves, Stockfish has just completely wrested most of black's dark square control away from black. So bishop e4 played, and the idea, of course, was that Igel is trying to first of all get the bishop active, so it would be able to attack the white queenside pawns, and also to fight for the f-file, not make it too trivial for Stockfish to exchange off rooks. But I'm afraid it is quite trivial. So h4 check takes, and now rook e1, king g7, and h5, king h6, king h4. And the pawns, well, they're just going to keep on advancing. Obviously, bishop c2. I could play a move like bishop d1 as well, just to cover everything. Rook f2 played, and now g5, king g7, bishop g4. And yeah, again, we're attacking the rook, and this rook can come to e3 to defend b3 if necessary. And well, we are starting getting close to the point where we don't care about these queenside pawns anymore, and these guys are just going to queen by themselves. So rook f4, king g3, bishop f5, hoping to get rid of the bishop and weaken these two. But bishop e2, bishop e4, and rook f1. And after bishop c2, bishop h3 played, and well, I'm afraid this is a little bit of a problem now, because after bishop b3, we just go h6, and you're just not going to be able to stop me from queening. I mean, king g6, I can play a move like bishop f5, and then king f7, I go g6. I mean, it's just careering through, basically. But that just means that if Igel can't go after the queenside pawns, then, well, what can you do? Bishop e6, king g4, bishop d1, king g3, a little bit of playing around there. We check. You were just sort of waiting to see what was going to happen here, but one idea would have been just to go bishop f1 and bishop d3 here, just chase the bishop away from there and then push these pawns on. So eagle took the pawn, but now the pawns roll. King f2, nobody knows why. g6, king f8, king g3, and yeah, actually you're just bringing the king in to f6 in order to create mate. Eagle starts giving away pawns and allows the queen, just sees that it was completely lost anyway, and Stockfish mated a few moves later. Yeah, the conversion was very smooth, of course, as always, from Stockfish. But I mean, you know, really, I think the crux of the game really was this this idea a4, and I was, you know, simply amazed by it. Just the idea that you can, you know, play these King's Indian positions in this way successfully, allow the blocking of the queen side, but as long as you're making sure that you get a few of those extra sort of advantages that you can then realize enough on the king side, was not something that really I would ever have dreamt of, to be honest. So yeah, really quite amazing. I've, you know, really feel I've learned an awful lot from that game, and well, definitely going to try this idea in my own games. It'll be interesting to see whether any strong players who possibly watch this this channel, whether they start you know, looking at stuff like this, because yeah, I think it's definitely something worth looking at. Anyway, there we are. I hope you enjoyed this this video. A bit of a longer one there, and yeah, a little bit more on the positional side. But I hope you you enjoyed it as well. Try and mix the positional and tactical videos, you know, to well, both have stuff you can really learn from, and also some stuff where you just say ooh and ah, you know, because it's so beautiful and amazing. So if you like the video, please give a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends all about it, and take a look at my books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which has got loads of stuff like this. And you know, if you watch this channel a lot and you read Silicon Road, you'll notice lots of elements, only they're explained in a lovely, you know, clear way and structured way. It's this video is always a little bit more chaotic somehow, but yeah, do take a look at that, or Reengineering the Chess Classics, which I think is a really super book. Again, you know, really making use of the amazing power and potential of the engines to analyze games and find lots of new stuff. But otherwise, you know, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next video. Lots more to come. Thanks very much.